Imperium, The Philosophy of History and Politics, Chapter 4, The Meaning of Facts. Whether or not a man's history outlook is also intellectually formulated as well as effective in his unconscious doing, thinking, and valuing is merely a function of his general personality. Some men have a greater inner need to think abstractly than others. It is not to be supposed that the sense for facts, the historical sense, dispenses with creative thinking. The development of the fact sense is primarily the seeing what is there without ethical or critical preconceptions of what should or should not be there, might or might not. Life facts are the data of history. A life fact is something which has happened. It does not matter to its status as a fact that no one may know of it, that it has vanished without a trace. Obviously, creative thinking enters into the process of interpreting the data of history, and a moment's reflection shows also that the process of assessing the data of history is a creative one. Physical facts, like resistance, sourness, redness, are accessible to everyone. Life facts are not accessible to a man who has a rigid view of history, and who knows that the purpose of all previous happenings was to make this age possible, who knows that history has the sole meaning of progress. Remnants of social ethics, preconceived historical notions, utility dogmas, all shut out their victims from inner participation in the life of the 20th and 21st centuries. To this century, the new vista now opens of assembling the lost facts in previous ages and previous cultures. Not tiny incidental data, but the broad outline of necessary organic developments that must have taken place. From our knowledge of past cultures and their structures, we can fill in missing developments in some from what has survived in others. Most important to us now alive, we can fill in what remains to the fulfillment of our own culture. This can be done in the way that a paleontologist can reconstruct in broad outlines an entire organism from a single skull fragment. The process is legitimate and trustworthy in both cases, for life has patterns in which it actualizes its unique individuals. From an anonymous work of literature remaining, a creative thinker can reconstruct a general picture of the unknown author. Can one not draw quite accurately the soul portrait of the unknown author of Das Büchlein von Vollkommen Leben? So also can the Crusades period of a culture be reconstructed if one has knowledge of its Reformation stage, or its Enlightenment phase. The realm of thought is interested in the missing stages of past cultures, and the future of our own. But action is interested in the past only as the key to effective performance. Thus, the higher importance of history writing and history thinking is that they serve effective action. The fact sense is only operative when dogma, socio-ethical ideas, and critical trappings are put aside. To the fact sense, it is important that hundreds of millions of people in a certain area believe in the truth of Confucian doctrines. To the fact sense, it is meaningless whether or not these doctrines are true, even though to religion, progress ideologies, and journalism, the truth or falsehood of Confucianism is important. To a 21st century history writer, the most important thing about the cells, ether waves, bacilli, electrons, and cosmic rays of our times will be that we believed in them. All of these notions, which the age considers facts, will vanish into the one fact for the 21st century that, once upon a time, this was a world picture of a certain kind of culture man. So do we look upon the nature theories of Aristarchus and Democritus in the classical culture. And thus facts, too, have their subjective and objective content. And again, it is the relationship between the man and the phenomenon that determines the form of the fact. Each culture has in its way its own facts, which arise out of its own problems. What the fact is depends on what man is experiencing the phenomenon, whether he belongs to a high culture, to which age thereof, to which nation, to which spiritual stratum, to which social stratum. The facts of the Second World War are one thing in this year, 1948, in the brains of the culture-bearing stratum of Europe, and something totally different in the minds of the newspaper-reading herds. By 2000, the view of the present culture-bearing stratum will have become also the view of the many, and by that time, more facts will be known to the independent thinkers about the same war than are now known to the few. For one of the characteristics of life facts is that distance, particularly temporal distance, shows up their lineaments more clearly. We know more of imperial history than Tacitus knew, more of Napoleonic history than Napoleon knew, vastly more of the First World War than its creators and participants knew, and Western men in 2050 will know our times in a way that we can never know them. To Brutus, his mythological ancestry was a fact, but to us, a more important fact is that he believed it. Thus, the fact sense, the prerequisite of the historical outlook of the 20th century, emerges as a form of the poetry of life. It is the very opposite of the prosaic, drab insistence of the materialistic outlook that facts had to submit to a progress ideology in order to be cognized as significant. This view absolutely excluded its victims from any insight into the beauty and the power of the facts of history, as well as from any understanding of their significance. The 21st century, whose men will be born into a time when this historical outlook is self-evident, will find it fantastic, if it ever takes notice of it, that in an earlier time men believed that all previous history was merely tending toward them. And yet, that was the outlook of the 19th century. Whole cultures, equaled by birth and spirituality to our own in every way, lived and died merely that the Philistinism of the progress ideologies could chalk up their achievements on the wall, meaning a few notions or technical devices.